breiten Faust an Lanzenschaft, die Zügel in der Linken, so springt des Reiches Ritterschaft und ihre Schwerter blinken. Heya, 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 und ihre Schwerter blinken. Heya, 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 und ihre Schwerter blinken.
Hello and welcome to Lex Orandi, Lex Credendi. I am Kenny, and today I will be talking about how to stay traditional while having limited or no access to the traditional Mass. First and most important, I would have to say get a Latin Missal. Now, you can get either the 62 or the pre-55. The only problem with getting the pre-55 is that if you go to Holy Week, then it's going to be different in your pre-55 Missal than a 62 Missal, and that's just because most Latin Masses are going to be 62 Missal. So my suggestion on that, before we get to anything else, is make sure you have a 62 Missal first, just so that you have that. Now, if you're lucky enough to be in an area where you have access to a pre-55 Latin Mass, where they do the pre-55 Holy Week, then go ahead and get yourself a Father Lassance pre-55 Missal. But outside of that, just get a 62. But I would say, even if you get a 62 Missal and you only have a 62 Mass, go ahead and get a pre-55 at some point down the road, because that is a very good Missal, and you will learn a lot just from reading the text. So if you go to the Novus Ordo, now bearing in mind this is if you don't have any impediments, moral impediments to going to the Novus Ordo, and that means that you're not scandalized by just a completely horrific Novus Ordo. Or if you have kids and you don't want to expose your kids to the modernism that you see in a Novus Ordo, because Novus Ordos are very Protestant. It's Protestant Catholicism. So I totally understand if you don't have access to a traditional Mass, you don't want to take your kids there. But if you are going to go, then bring your Missal. Just open her up. I've got here in my hand my 62 Missal, which is the one I suggest you get. And again, unless you have access to the better Mass. But you just start off with the prayers at the foot of the cross. And obviously most of you don't know Latin, so just pray it in English. Unless you want to learn it, then go for it. That's what I'm trying to do at the moment. But you just do, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, I will go to the altar of God, to God who giveth joy to my youth. Judge me, O God, and distinguish my cause from the nation that is not holy. Deliver me from the unjust and deceitful man. And then, of course, it continues, for thou art God, my strength. Why hast thou cast me off? And why do I go sorrowful whilst the enemy afflicteth me? And it just keeps going like that. And then, of course, you'll turn the page, and then you get to the Confiteor. Confess to Almighty God, to Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, to Blessed Michael the Archangel, to Blessed John the Baptist, the holy apostles Peter and Paul, and to all the saints, and to you, Father, that I have sinned exceedingly in thought, word, and deed, through my most grievous fault. Therefore I beseech Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, Blessed Michael the Archangel, Blessed John the Baptist, the holy apostles Peter and Paul, all the saints, and you, Father, to pray to the Lord our God for me. And then, of course, you just continue. You go through the Kyrie, But before you get to the Kyrie, of course, you got the introit. So that's I would have to say the hardest part is with a Latin missal. There's a lot of flipping back and forth. So before you try to pray the Latin Mass missal during a Novus Ordo, familiarize yourself with it. Make sure you have your ribbons in the right place, and make sure that you're paying attention to where you're going to have to flip back and forth at. Because, like this particular one, I had the Summorum Pontificum. I think this is Baronius Press. Yeah, Baronius Press, Summorum Pontificum edition. And so the one I've got, you've got a place where you have the order of the Mass, then you have another spot for like the readings, the prayers that go for that Mass that day, and then there's another spot that you flip to whenever you're about to do the Sanctus, so the prefaces for that. And so just make sure you're familiarized with how to flip back and forth. But and there's some stuff that you do need to remember, like obviously you don't pray the consecration part, because that's the priest only. So just flip past that. If you want to just read it and not pray it, just so that you can familiarize yourself with it, then I think that's fine. But those prayers ain't for you. You're not priest. Which brings me to another thing, and this is something I only recently found out in the last couple of months. And this is why I say you should get the older missals, like the Pre-55, because this is where I learned it. But at the elevation, when the priest says, this is my body, and then lifts up the host and the bells ring and all that, even in the Novus Ordo, you look at the host and look on the host with reverence and say, my Lord and my God, and there's an indulgence attached to that. And so if you go to Mass every week like you're supposed to, and the consecration happens, and you look at the host and say reverently, my Lord and my God, there you go. You just got yourself an indulgence. So the best thing you can do in this situation is just, if you can go to a Novus Ordo, you can find like a decent one, and just so that you can fulfill your Sunday obligation, just pray the prayers in the Missal. Obviously, if you have like serious moral impediments to going, like, you're going to a Mass where, let's just go to the extreme, like one of these clown masses that you hear a lot of Catholic podcasters talking about, where people literally are dressing up like clowns. Or I've even heard of, I can't even remember where I heard this. This was years ago, before I was even in the church. And of course, guilty as charged. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world back then, but I was also a Protestant at the time. So, this was back before I came into the church. But there was apparently a priest who was an extreme Star Trek fan. And he said the entire Mass in Klingon. And so back then, I was young and dumb, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Nowadays, if I saw that, okay, fine. I love Star Trek. But I don't want to go to Mass and hear the entire Mass in Klingon. It's not reverent. That's not respectful to God. Okay, moving on. So, if for whatever reason you cannot get to a decent Mass, well, actually, first, if you can get to a decent Mass, just go ahead and do the prayers. But if for whatever reason you cannot, then what you need to do is you just basically need to, at minimum on Sundays, the rest of the days you should try to do as well. Get yourself a traditional calendar, 62 calendar at minimum. Pre-55, by some miracle, you can get a hold of it. I think the the only people you're going to get those from is the Sedes. So just look up one of those Sede sites and you can probably get a pre-55 if you really want one. But 62 works just fine. Follow along the Mass for that day, the readings for that day, and, just keep up your spiritual life, keep up your prayer life, but don't let it become a permanent thing. You've got to be making an active effort to find a traditional Latin Mass. If you can't find a traditional Latin Mass, then your next option is try to find a Eastern Byzantine rite, one that's not, in schism with the Catholic Church. Just make sure that they're one of the Eastern rites that have come back in, which is why we call them Byzantine instead of Orthodox. After that, I know that some people get a little about it because of what it is exactly, but if you can go to a Anglican ordinariate, for anybody who does not know, are Anglicans who came back to the Catholic Church but wanted to maintain their Anglican identity, and so the priests are allowed to remain priests and be married and basically all the Anglican stuff, only they had to tweak the theology a little bit and a few things in the Mass. Obviously, you're praying for the Pope and the local bishop and not the Bishop of Canterbury I guess it would be the king now, but you're swapping all that over and making it Catholic. And so that is an option if you can find yourself an Anglican ordinariate. But other than that, I can't think of anything. As long as the Mass is valid and traditional, I say go for it. So that means any Mass. That FSSP, SSPX, Institute of Christ the King. I may lose some friends over this one, but even if you can find a valid Sede Mass, so the SSPV, for example, I don't have a problem with that. Now, again, this comes down to moral impediment. If you just think that Sedes are just completely blasphemous and you just cannot morally set foot in a Sede Mass, then just ignore what I'm saying about that. But all I'm saying is that is an option. But avoid like what were their names? The Diamond Brothers type Sedes. Just don't even go there, because they will scandalize. Well, they'll scandalize you. If you have kids, definitely they'll scandalize your kids, because they'll sit there and make you think that the Catholic standing next to you is a heretic and outside the church, simply because they don't go to the extreme that they want these particular Catholics to go to. So anyway, but I mean, as far as all that goes, just find a way to go to Mass on a regular basis and stay traditional, whether that's going to a Novus Ordo and just praying the traditional prayers, finding a traditional Latin Mass, which is the preference, finding a Eastern rite that you can go to just for the sake of going to a Reverent Mass or a Anglican Ordinariate, if you're okay with that one. So I guess that's pretty much it for this. So just take what I said and do the research yourself. Sit down, think about it, pray about it. And I'm easy to contact. I may not respond immediately because I get a lot of weird fake accounts contacting me, so I might not respond immediately just because I'm trying to determine whether you're real or not. But you can contact me on Facebook, the Knights Templar. I'm on Twitter under the same name, and you cannot miss either one of them because it is a picture of a Knights Templar with holding a green lightsaber. So if you want to get a hold of me on either of those accounts, go for it. And it's just Knights Templar. There's no "the" in there, so just Knights Templar. So if you like what I have been saying today, and you want to hear more, just like, subscribe, and then if you don't mind, share wherever you share. That be Facebook, Twitter, and wherever else people share these things. I don't know. Make sure you pray for our Holy Father, whether you believe he is actually our Holy Father or not. Pray for his conversion. If you think that he's not the Pope, then pray that he be converted and correct his current position. Or if you're like me and you think that's above your pay grade and you're just going to assume he's the Pope until we find out otherwise, just pray for him to be a better Pope or for a better Pope to come along. That is all I have for today, so I will catch you later, and Deus Vult.